For a time, I kept on having reoccurring dreams where a tiger would appear. This could be in all sorts of settings and scenarios, usually outside the normal habitat one would expect of a tiger. For instance, walking down a busy city street, lounging in a restaurant, in the queue of a supermarket. At no time did I feel threatened by this tiger, although I did feel the tiger was focused on me. But I did not feel it was stalking or desiring me for lunch. The society I grew up in always felt alien with values I could not relate, so I went searching for another. I was fascinated with the myths and culture of the East and left for India, like generations of lost hippies before me, although I would not be happy if you called me a hippie. Of course, modern India was nothing like the idealised romantic notions that I had envisioned through these myths. But nevertheless, there was still plenty of magic and inspiration to be found. Although, of course, there was also frequent visits to squalid toilets, literally shitholes, through regular bouts of dysentery, along with hectic, over-enthusiastic salespeople to bring me down to earth. Travelling all over India, I eventually arrived at Rishikesh at the foot of the Himalayas on the Ganges River. Made famous as the place where the Beatles studied with the Maharishi. Here you can take your pick from literally hundreds of ashrams. Spiritual centres that teach various spiritual disciplines such as yoga and meditation. The one I chose was not necessarily because it was the best or the most esteemed, more because it was cheap and had been recommended. It had a large square central courtyard with grass and some flower beds, where outdoor yoga sessions would sometimes take place. The basic but comfortable guest rooms looked onto the courtyard, but had shutters if you wanted privacy. No ashram is complete without its guru, and this particular spiritual centre had a very austere looking figurehead, with a bald head who was rarely seen and was represented by various life-size painted wooden cutouts with mechanical waving arms. His two main deputies were two brothers with long hair with two very distinct personalities. One was very serious and disciplined, the other more playful and mischievous. The mischievous one was frequently drunk, even though alcohol was banned within the ashram. He was also a little fresh, and it was also comically obvious that he was enamoured with the girlfriend I was travelling with. Amusing because he was gentle and harmless with it. He was the Love Guru, years before the Love Guru had been released. I wonder if Mike Myers was influenced by him for his character. Interestingly, many years later I watched a travel show that visited India and had a feature on Rishikesh. The main guru featured was the mischievous alcoholic brother, now with a more appropriately sober and blissed out persona. He had become the figurehead of his own very impressive ashram. The serious brother was nowhere to be seen. I wonder if there's any bitterness regarding his brother's surprising rise up the guru ladder. Each day we would learn various yoga positions and also discuss various spiritual topics. On one particular occasion, the subject turned to dreams. The spiritual teacher, the serious brother, explained that we should not spend too much time deciphering our dreams, except certain types of dreams, such as vivid dreams and especially reoccurring dreams. Of course, this made me think of the tiger that continually reappeared in my dreams. I had never told him of my tiger dreams, and indeed never did. But what fascinated me is the story that he proceeded to tell about a man who could make his dreams come true. This particular man was quite poor, so he dreamt of money, a beautiful house, and it became so. Being lonely and wanting a family, he dreamt of a beautiful wife and brilliant doting children, and they became so. He was very happy and loved his wife and children, but for no particular reason, he began to envision a tiger. This tiger then came to this beautiful house and proceeded to slaughter his children and his wife, and finally to kill him. A real parable of be careful what you wish for, or to have control of the mind. The appearance of the tiger at the end of this parable made me further question the significance of its constant appearance in my dreams. The none too happy ending also encouraged me further to research the potential meaning to me. Being native to the lands of India, the tiger makes numerous appearances in myths and legends. In history, they always vied with humans to be number one on the food chain, only conclusively toppled with the onset of firearms. It is a fearsome predator, so it is no wonder that in mythology it is often connected with one of the most fearsome of the Hindu gods, Kali. She is the goddess of destruction, and even Shiva is subject to her force in her most fearsome aspects. She represents the reality that everything eventually must come to an end. For without death, there cannot be rebirth, as the cycle continues. For this cyclical association, she is also linked to the concept of time. In India, you see various holy men and sometimes holy women who usually align themselves with one of a pantheon of the various Hindu gods. Those aligned with Krishna or Vishnu are usually quite blissed out and friendly. Shivaites can sometimes begin to get a little intimidating, especially those that live in graveyards and cover their skin with the ash of dead people. But those who hold the images of Kali can be the most fearsome. They can sometimes be seen walking the streets, whipping themselves, or performing various acts of self-mutilation involving needles or other sharp implements. One can be relieved that they are self-harming, because there is a tradition with worshippers of Kali of killing members of the public as a sacrifice to the honour of Kali. This is rarely seen today, but it is not unknown. The word thug comes from the Indian cult called the Thuggies, who used to roam India, attacking and killing travellers as sacrifices for Kali. So you can imagine it could be easy for me to take a negative of this constant appearance of the tiger. But I also try to be positive about it, as the tiger can be seen to represent power and strength. Perhaps it would bring this into my life. Returning from India had unexpected complications, in that the culture shock is often more profound returning than arriving. The heat, smell and poverty is pretty overwhelming when going to India. But you don't realise how sexualised our culture is until you return. There is a constant nagging, incessant desire that infuses our consumerist ethos. My girlfriend and I partied to different towns in the UK, her to Southampton and me Sheffield. The intention being that we would come together in the not too distant future, although we had not yet decided where that would be. Anyway, the tiger dreams continued as I arrived in Sheffield, becoming even more vivid, and the tiger seemed to be developing even more intense focus towards me and getting closer and closer. While before it seemed to be just watching me, now it had taken on a more sinister air, and it actually seemed to be stalking me. Then one night, the tiger came so close I could smell it and hear its breathing. We stared intently at each other, in the eyes. Then suddenly, totally by surprise, it leapt at me, and I felt its claws dig into my back and its jaws clench around my neck, its terrible breath in my face, which unsurprisingly woke me up. The tiger had got me. I was never to dream of the tiger again. The next day, I was contacted by my girlfriend, who told me that she thought it would be better if we went our separate ways. This was totally unexpected. It was a bolt from the blue. I loved Sarah. She was my world. I was in shock and my world was collapsing around me. In hindsight, the tiger was always a warning of this moment, the synchronicity of the attack in my dream, and then the ending of the relationship, further compounding this. I had never really considered how I would be if it finished between myself and Sarah, but I sank into sadness and despair. This would continue for years with a constant feeling of melancholy that I just could not shake. In many ways, part of me did die after the ending of the relationship, like I had been slayed in my dream. Initially, I swung between bouts of frozen depression and intense, fiery rage. And during one of my manic moments, I decided to express my out-of-control emotions on paper. Wanting some kind of cathartic expression, I created an artwork that expressed my mental state. It combined the fire of my anger and frustration with an image of Sarah and the tiger that had become a symbol of the relationship's demise. The tiger and Sarah had become one and the same, the destroyer of my world, the consumer of my peace, and the igniting of a fire I could not control. Although it was my intention for the girl to look like Sarah, my enraged state did not lend well to creating a likeness, and the image did not actually look much like my girlfriend at all. It had quite a unique look, with a distinctive chin and cheekbones and green eyes. Back, while we were still together and travelling in India, we had brought a pair of Tibetan masks in Dharamsala, where the Dalai Lama has his residency. Interestingly, we did get to meet him quite unintentionally. We had gone on a wander and came across him giving an audience, which we were then able to join. Anyway, one of these masks had the blissed out face of an enlightened Buddha, the other the enraged face of a Dharma protector. As these masks would now be split between us, no prizes for guessing which one I got. The masks reminded me of two friends I had while working in Greece. They were stunning dancers in a nightclub, whose job it was to attract admirers to the club with their seductive moves. They were called Maddie and Sally, and they had very different personalities. Maddie being more fiery and spontaneous, Sally being more elegant and considered. Maddie was famous for the quote, "It's like I'm the chaos and she's the calm," as though there was some kind of esoteric yin-yang style harmony between them, like together they made the whole. But whereas the binary opposition of Sally and Maddie brought them together, made them a whole, like the attraction of a magnet, the becoming of chaos and calm of me and Sarah drove us apart, opposites opposing and repelling. Sarah took the mask of the Buddha in calm. I took the mask of the protector with fiery anger, becoming binary opposites that did not attract, but repelled. Slowly, I began to have other relationships, but it didn't feel right and they never lasted. I took years to get over my loss, with a constant feeling of melancholy that I just could not kick. The fiery tiger picture was forgotten about for a while, buried inside my art folder. That was one of the few possessions that I took around with me. We now rejoin the story 7 years later, and I'm working picking apples, appropriately in a biblical context in Israel, amongst abundant but disinterested snakes. I'd got into a relationship with a sweet Danish girl. She was 19 and I was 26. And initially, I did not want to get involved as I felt there was too much of an age gap. But for some reason, she wouldn't give up, and she was too beautiful to resist. There was another girl who I worked with from South Africa, with whom I got on really well. She was interested in a lot of the esoteric subjects that I was, and we had some great conversations. She was quite tall, statuesque, with a strong presence like an Amazonian, and definitely not sweet. She wore a Greek-style arm bracelet with a spiral design. Like me, she had been travelling quite a lot, and because of this lifestyle, she had left a few boyfriends in her wake with broken hearts. She had this whole philosophy of committing herself totally to these relationships, but not getting attached at the same time. She was very independent. She told me how she always had a thing about tigers, and how she had a collection of tiger images and various paraphernalia. She told me how her exes always gave her images of tiger. At the time, I did not think too much about the symbolism of the tiger in relation to her. I had told her I was an artist, and she asked me if I could paint her a picture of a tiger because of her collection. In that instant, I remembered the picture I had of my ex-girlfriend and the tiger that had been lost inside my art folder over the last few years. I went back to the small room I was staying, lit by candlelight as the electricity had broken, covered in paintings of invented deities that had adorned onto the walls that I felt made the place look magical, but others probably thought looked insane and cultish. However, most visitors would compliment me on the colourful beautifications. Anyway, looking through my folder, I finally came across the image that had been buried for years, and to my surprise, the female figure next to the tiger held a deeper resonance with my situation that I realised. She was the splitting image of Melanie. The hairs on my arm stood on end as I saw the distinctive cheekbones and chin and the green eyes. Skeptics would say that it can't really look like her, as it is not in a realistic style, being somewhat graphical and cartoonish. But anyone that latterly saw it, that knew her, instantly commented that it was Melanie without my prompting. It took some time for me to show it to her, but next day at work, I told her how, to my surprise, the image with the tiger looked just like her. She was very intrigued by this and asked me to show her. I kept on meaning to bring it in and show her, but never got round to it, and then I forgot all about it for a couple of weeks until we remembered it in a conversation. She knew nothing of its content, only that it had a tiger and a doppelganger, but had no awareness of its fire association. Finally, I got myself organised one day, as we had the day off, and decided to head to Melanie's block with the image in a little folder. I had nearly arrived at her block when I noticed smoke bellowing from it and people running out, coughing and spluttering. Lastly, Melanie emerges from the block in quite a bad way, obviously suffering badly from smoke inhalation. Eventually, the story is pieced together as the people from the block get their composure and their lungs begin to clear. Apparently, Melanie had fallen asleep with candles alight throughout her room, and one had blown over and set her room alight. Luckily, the fire was eventually extinguished without too much damage, and no one was badly hurt or burned. I had been understandably distracted by all the drama, but then remembered the reason why I had made the journey to Melanie's in the first place, and took the picture up. Flames are an essential part of the artwork. The girl and the tiger are essentially on fire. The chances of me finally arriving with the artwork that I'd spoken about for weeks at the very moment that Melanie has set herself on fire are beyond mere coincidence, and made the fiery content of the picture all the more significant. She could not believe it when she saw it, and was a little spooked. I was further amazed when she pointed out that she had only just cut her hair a few hours earlier. Before, it had been very long and all one length, and now she had the layered look of the picture. So what did all this mean? There was obviously some profound synchronicity occurring, but to be quite honest, at the time it was more of a, yeah, that's bizarre, but I didn't really think that much about it. It's only looking back at the whole situation and considering Melanie's character that I can perhaps assess the message of the synchronicity, if indeed there is one. I discussed how devastated I was with the ending of my relationship that ended in me expressing my anger, frustration and depression in the painting that became the image that is the centerpiece of this story. I also told you that during my friendship with Melanie, I was dating a young, sweet Danish girl. Although she was, and still is, an amazing girl, we wanted different things out of a relationship. She was travelling with a friend and did not want her to feel left out. My initial reservations about the relationship were actually quite foretelling. We were at different stages in our lives and wanted different things from a relationship. I discussed the problem of the relationship with Melanie, and she told me that I should just kill her and move on. Those were her actual words. Obviously, she did not mean to literally kill her, more to finish a relationship, but I remember feeling that's a bit ruthless. I think her use of words did not help me to really get where she was coming from. At the time, I didn't really make the connection, but it is interesting how Melanie's turn of phrase, kill her and move on, echoed the correlation with being killed by the tiger in my dream and the painful end of my relationship with Sarah. As things worked out, I really should have taken Melanie's advice. I kept up with the non-satisfactory relationship for some time, despite there being more appropriate opportunities. Part of my reason, as well as a genuine love, albeit more innocent than I would have liked, was that I was concerned that if I finished it, she would become prey to people that would not care for her like I did, which would hurt her. This was probably more based on fear than any possible actuality, as she was a lot more aware of people's intention than I gave her credit. In the end, it finished more through circumstance with the fact we were from two different countries, and although there was some pain, it was not the hurt that I experienced when it ended with Sarah. This is the downside of attachment, and is why relationships should be navigated with care. There is a danger of becoming dependent within a relationship, of losing yourself in devotion to another. Compromise can be good and is the oil of socialization. But if it is always yourself that is conceding, this can become masochistic and self-destructive. We should strive to maintain a degree of independence, of self-reliance, as if you become too dependent, what happens when the crutch is taken away? This is not to say that you should become closed-hearted and untrusting. Just give and receive love unconditionally without the sense of ownership. Kali is associated with death, but like the tarot card of the same name, this does not have to be actual physical death. It is often associated with the end of a chapter, for example, the end of school, a job, or perhaps of a relationship. She is also associated with time, and of course time goes around in circles. But sometimes the old cycle has to end for a new one to begin. Some endings are harder for us to deal with than others, but we should always try to see the reason for the new cycle. The only thing certain in life is change. Nothing is permanent. If you try to resist change, you know who's going to come along and make the change. It is the flow of time, and sometimes, like Melanie said, we need to be the one that kills a situation that is not working, not always wait for it to happen to us. There is pain, there is hurt, but if we are strong and true, the the phoenix will rise from the ashes.